We know the bad news in BP. They've got the problems with Rosneft. They've got the problems with Macondo in the Gulf of Mexico. These are all well known about. They've made a firm commitment to the dividend where, there had been some suggestions that they may waver on that. Now, that suggests to me that the dividend to investors should be safe because they can always borrow a little bit more just to keep the equity investor happy in the meantime.
David Battersby from Redmayne Bentley Stockbrokers. Well, the rising price of oil has been one of the main movers on the financial markets today. I asked Joe Saluzzi from Timmis Trading in New Jersey if it had been what investors had been waiting for.
A couple months ago, we would have said oil going higher is bad for the markets. Now it's good for the market. It was up 6% today. It's now up over 20% in the last few sessions. And I think it could be, some people are saying it's a technical bounce. It could be some short covering, or it could be even some companies were saying that they were going to reduce their rig counts and capital spending could be cut. So that's more of a longer term supply issue. So, it depends. It could be early to tell. We don't know if it's really bottomed out yet.
Yeah, BP was one of those energy giants that said it was going to restrict its capital expenditure over the next year. So that could account for this jump, do you think? Because people are looking ahead to the fact that in the longer term, there could be less oil exploration.
It could be, but supply channels, from what I hear from some folks who really know oil much better than I do, it takes time for that to seep through. It's not just overnight where they're going to flip a switch and say, okay, the supply is now dwindled. So I think it's too soon to tell there. I think it's certainly more of a, it feels like more of a trading situation over the last couple of days. So we'll see if it holds. If it holds, then it could be a sign of a good thing. But we've seen many times in many markets in the past where they bounce like this only to fall back to the lows again.
So it might not just be necessarily about the supply of oil. Could it also be about worldwide demand? Are there any indications out there, any other numbers coming through today, talking about growth in the world economy?
Not that I saw. Actually, in the U.S., we had a factory order which was less than expected, and it was down like 3.5%. So I haven't seen anything really bullish when it comes to global growth stories. All I'm seeing continuously is central bank intervention. The Australians cut their rate again last night, which could have set the currencies off. Obviously, Greece, you've got your situation going on over there, whether it's a deal or not a deal. So I think currency markets there are certainly playing a much, much bigger factor in the markets overall.
Looking at the US markets in particular, quite a good day for the Dow Jones. To what extent have the better than expected car sales helped the index rise?
I think a big chunk of the index actually was energy-related stocks. Being that oil was up, energy stocks were up over 3% today, so that was significant. But, certainly car sales are good, and then partially some people are thinking that maybe lower gasoline prices are helping.
And that was Joe Saluzzi from Timmis Trading in New Jersey. Well, some latest numbers now for you. On Wall Street, the Dow is up 1.8% at 17,666. And at the end of the day in London, the 100 share index was up 1.3% at 68.71. You're listening to the BBC World Service, the world's radio station. And it's a very good morning to our listeners in Hong Kong on medium wave 675 kilohertz. And also hello to our listeners in Accra in Ghana on 101.3. All the best things come in small packages, that's the old saying. But as far as chocolate is concerned, plenty of people don't think that's the case, including me. The bigger the bar, the better. Now, there's been quite a big consumer backlash in Australia over the last few days after shoppers noticed that the manufacturer had shrunk the size of its family-sized chocolate bar. And so-called shrinkflation, it appears, is happening all over the world. Here in the UK, it's been a quest of diminishing returns for some shoppers. Our reporter Katie Howell went out to investigate.
Well, we're already getting that, aren't we, with the Cadbury's Cream Eggs. Instead of 6 in a box, there's only 5 in a box. So it's already happening here anyway. We're just not being told of it.
And what do you think about it?
Well, it's better for us healthy-wise, but less. If you wanted better quality chocolate, we're always going to get less, aren't we?
Yeah, I think that's ridiculous. Like, they're only after profits. With the Freddos, they charged like 5 or 10p before, and now they're charging like 20p per Freddo, and it's just all for profit now.
I think it's unethical.
Why do you think it's unethical?
Because you're getting less chocolate for more money.
And would you prefer to spend a little bit more and get more chocolate again, or would you rather have the...
I'd rather say to spend the same amount and have the same amount of chocolate.
I probably still would buy the Cadbury because I still prefer it, but it's still a bit hard done by for a bit, and then wouldn't notice it after that, after the first first couple of bars, I'd say.
So it seems to happen all the time where they reduce the actual size. It's almost to try and fool you into thinking that it's the same. And it is obviously just related to profits.
And the mysterious shrinking chocolate bar is not due to that famous chocolate maker Willy Wonka's magic. According to Harry Wallop, consumer expert at Britain's Daily Telegraph, companies are blaming the volatility of commodity prices.
Cocoa prices spiked last year, bizarrely because of the Ebola crisis in West Africa, which is the largest area of cocoa production. But it was a temporary spike, and cocoa prices have subsequently fallen. And if we look at a bar of chocolate, in fact, there's all sorts of things that go into it, not just cocoa. It's a lot of milk, and milk prices are unbelievably low at the moment. There's a lot of sugar, and sugar prices are on the way down. And the biggest commodity that goes into all packaged goods is oil derived. It's the actual packaging itself, and it's the distribution, and it's the manufacturing costs, and they are all related to the price of oil. Oil is on the way down.
So with the price of oil on the way down, you believe that perhaps these companies aren't justified in putting up their prices, and instead they're just trying to trim their product to boost their profits.
It's as simple as that. This is a profit-taking exercise.
It's not just Cadbury's, is it? Because we've heard as well that Nestle, for example, has reduced the size of its quality street.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Nearly all consumer product companies are doing this. The big boys and the little ones, be it Kraft, be it Unilever, be it Procter & Gamble, it's furniture polish, children's napkins, tins of tuna. Anything you can think of has been shrunk in size in recent years. And there's good reason for this, because consumers are, bizarrely, more accepting of smaller pack sizes. They don't notice the rising prices which they tend to notice. And also, because of the rise of discounters all around the world, particularly the pound shops or the dollar stores, people have become obsessed by certain price points. So if you take Christmas chocolates, for instance, in those tins, be it Quality Street in Britain, that is £5. It has been £5 for a long time. Consumers will notice when the supermarket puts it up to £5, so it's a lot easier to ask the manufacturers to take a few chocolates out of it and keep it at £5 than increase the price.
So do you think the old adage, all good things come in smaller packages, really rings true then for consumers? They much prefer small rather than large.
Well, I think they're less noticeable of smaller pack sizes, and they would kick up an almighty fuss if prices rose as quickly as the pack sizes were shrinking.
But as far as you're concerned, with the oil price so much lower than this time last year, chocolate should be less expensive, and we should be getting more of it.
I think it's time for these shrinking pack sizes, which have been going on for quite a few years. It's a time for it to stop. Come on. There is no reason for consumer products to be quite reduced as they are at the moment.
And that was Harry Wallop, consumer expert at the Daily Telegraph newspaper, talking about the mysterious shrinking chocolate bar. It certainly made me a little bit peckish, and there might be a bit less of it, but I might still have a cocoa hit on the way home. Thanks for listening to World Business Report. From all of us here, goodbye.
A Richer World from the BBC World Service. In India, 2/3 of the population don't have access to a fridge. So what does owning a fridge and the contents in it say about changing wealth, consumption and lifestyles?
One of the basic necessities, you need a fridge.
I'm Anu Anand. Join me for the debate Fridgeonomics on the BBC World Service. Online at bbcworldservice.com/richerworld.
This is the BBC World Service.
Let's speak to the BBC's Shamak Khalil, joins us now live from Islamabad.
BBC's global health correspondent Tulip Mazumdar reports from the British Treatment Centre at
Beth McLeod reports from Dallas. The BBC's G.R. Gold can give an exclusive access. From Dresden, the BBC's Jenny Hill reports.
This is the BBC World Service, the world radio station.
BBC World Service with the Helena Merriman with the inquiry. This week, as Nigeria's neighbours agreed to provide extra troops to fight Boko Haram, we ask, is Nigeria's army failing? We tell the story of the soldiers who refused to fight.
They were reloaded to the battlefront without arms and ammunition, adequate weapons.
The the president's security advisor tells us what he makes of the mutineers.
I chalk it down to somebody who's a coward, who's looking for excuses, and that is what it is.
And we hear why the military may be to blame for its own problems.
Military governments, as is surprisingly quite common in world history, are often not good at funding their own militaries.
Zniszczono twoją wieżę.
Join me and our 3 expert witnesses for the inquiry after the main world news.
BBC News with Jonathan Eisen. The Jordanian government has vowed to avenge the killing of its Air Force pilot by Islamic State militants with an earth-shaking response after a video purported to show him being burned alive. Security sources said a failed suicide bomber being held in Jordan would be executed within hours. The jihadist group had previously demanded the woman's release as part of a hostage swap. A number of other prisoners have also been moved to an execution site. From Amman, Paul Evans has more.
Jordanians greeted the news with horror. Many have seen the gruesome video, barely edited, played over and over on television. Hundreds gathered in the streets after dark, demanding revenge against Lieutenant Kasasco's killers. Some also wanted to know why Jordan is involved in this fight at all. The pilot's father was among supporters when the news came through. He and other family members have now left the capital to mourn at home. Jordan's defense ministry says the pilot's blood will not have been shed in vain. It's promising a fitting punishment.
In a televised address from Washington, King Abdullah of Jordan described Islamic State as a deviant group that had no connection with the Muslim faith. The king is due to meet President Obama around now before cutting short his visit to the United States to return home. He called Kasasco a hero who died defending his country.
لقد قضى طيار الشجاع.
Valiant pilot Muaz died defending his beliefs, homeland and nation. He joins all the martyrs who made the ultimate sacrifice before him for dear Jordan. Today, we stand shoulder to shoulder with the family of the martyr hero Muaz, with our people and our armed forces in this tragedy.
Police in Canada have announced charges against 3 men they accuse of having links to Islamic State militants. They have arrested one of the men, a Canadian national, who they say was planning to aid and recruit IS fighters. The police have issued international arrest warrants for 2 others said to have left Canada to fight for the militants. An Argentine investigator has said that the special prosecutor found dead in his apartment last month, Alberto Nisman, had considered requesting the arrest of President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner. The prosecutor confirmed that draft arrest warrants for Ms. Fernandez and her foreign minister were retrieved from Mr. Nisman's apartment. Willa Davis has more.
The papers were found in rubbish bins by investigators still working at the scene of the death. Although the draft warrants weren't included in Mr. Nisman's final report, the president has repeatedly dismissed his central accusations that she and her officials were doing secret deals with Iran to absolve it of any role in the 1994 car bombing of a Jewish cultural centre in which 85 people were killed. President Fernández de Kirchner is soon due to return to Argentina from a high-profile trade mission to China. She'll face a barrage of questions and criticism after the latest revelations.
World News from the BBC. The Pentagon says a US drone strike in Somalia has killed the senior leader of the militant group Al-Shabaab. The spokesman said the outcome of the attack was still being assessed. In September last year, the leader of Al-Shabaab, Ahmed Abdiqudane, was killed in a similar operation. From the Pentagon, Gary O'Donoghue reports.
This strike took place last Saturday south of the Somali capital Mogadishu. The Pentagon said that Hellfire missiles were fired from a drone, though as far as they could tell, no civilians were hit in the process. The spokesman, Rear Admiral John Kirby, said he wasn't in a position to confirm the result of the attack. He said he was no longer breathing, as he put it, it would represent a significant strike against Al-Shabaab's capabilities. The Pentagon said the commander was head of the group's intelligence and security apparatus and responsible for planning attacks outside Somalia.
Members of Parliament in Britain have voted overwhelmingly in favour of a controversial scientific technique allowing the creation of babies using DNA from 3 people. If the measure is approved by the House of Lords, Britain will become the first country in the world to legalise the procedure. Reports from northeast Nigeria say Chadian troops have taken control of a border town which in the hands of Boko Haram militants. A French news agency reporter there said the Chadian soldiers moved into Gamboru on Tuesday after pounding Boko Haram positions for several days by planes and helicopters. There are also reports that Chadian soldiers are massing further northwest on Niger's border with Nigeria. The author of one of the best-selling books of all time, To Kill a Mockingbird, is to publish a second novel more than half a century after the first. Harper Lee's publishers say the new work, entitled Go Set a Watchman, will be released in July. The novel was completed in the 1950s before To Kill a Mockingbird, but was put aside because Lee's publisher wanted a story featuring the main character Scout as a child. BBC News.
BBC World Service. This is Helena Merriman with The Inquiry. This week is the Nigerian army failing. In the early hours of Sunday the 26th of January, Boko Haram gunmen attacked the town of Molduna in northeastern Nigeria. They set houses on fire, abducted women and children, and killed scores of civilians. The Nigerian military fought back, but were soon outgunned and overwhelmed. The insurgents took the city. The soldiers then fled to Maiduguri, the main city in the northeast, only to find that it, too, was under attack.
Around midnight, then we started hearing some gunshots, heavy gunshots.
This man was there.
So people started running away. There were fighter jets. They were going up and down, and immediately were firing heavy guns towards where the insurgents were attacking Maiduguri.
The army fought back with ground troops and airstrikes, repelling the insurgents. But only 30 kilometers away, Boko Haram insurgents were descending on a third city, Konduga. It was a daring three-pronged attack. By the end of the day, Boko Haram was in control of most of the roads leading to Maiduguri, the city it planned to make the capital of its caliphate. Here was yet another embarrassment for the army, which has been unable to contain the insurgency. Since Boko Haram launched military attacks 6 years ago to create an Islamic State, the president, Goodluck Jonathan, said they've killed more than 13,000 people. They've seized vast swathes of territory too, now controlling an area the size of Belgium. So this week, we want to know, is the Nigerian army failing?
That we're all proud of, but there's a lot of work to be done now for the armed forces to restore their lost glory.
This is Femi Falana, one of Nigeria's top human rights lawyers. He's well known for taking on poor and disadvantaged clients that now include a particular group of soldiers from the 7th Division in Maiduguri, that key town in the northeast.
These are young men whose ages range between 21 and 24 averagely. They joined the army with little or no training. They were railroaded to the battlefront without arms and ammunition, adequate weapons.
This particular group of soldiers is unique in one respect. They're all facing death by firing squad after being convicted in a military court of mutiny. Femi Falana says that what happened in those mutinies tells a story about why the army is failing.
Well, what happened was that the general officer commanding the 7th Division had a lot of complaints lodged by the soldiers, complaints of lack of payment of their salary and operational allowances, lack of adequate weapons, and general neglect, which were not attended to.
On the 14th of May last year, the dead bodies of 10 soldiers killed fighting Boko Haram were brought back to the camp. This lit a fuse.
The immediate cause was the fact that the dead bodies, corpses of 10 soldiers who had been killed in what the soldiers believed were avoidable circumstances. That infuriated them, and that led to the that unfortunate incident coincided with the visit of the GOC, General Officer Commanding. The soldiers protested and shot at his car. The authorities decided to charge them for mutiny. Of course, they were tried and convicted, sentenced to death.
Then, just a few months later, the army had a more serious mutiny on its hands. It started after Boko Haram invaded a military camp.
In this instance, on the 9th of July, the Boko Haram sect invaded the camp of SF-11 Battalion. 3 officers and 23 soldiers were killed, while 82 were badly wounded. Their commanding officer did assure them that he was no longer going to send them to the battlefront without adequate weapons. Barely 3 weeks later, he asked them to confront the Boko Haram sect,
reminding him of his promise not to send them into battle without adequate weapons. Some soldiers refused to go. So the commander just took those soldiers who were willing to fight. The result? They were outgunned and captured.
A week later, the authorities in Maiduguri now sent weapons to the same soldiers who had refused to fight. They now picked the weapon and went to the battlefield, dislodged the Boko Haram sect, and extricated their officer and all the other soldiers who had been captured.
So the soldiers did go and fight in the end.
The soldiers that had refused to fight now got weapons and fought gallantly.
And then when they got back to their base,
they were arrested and charged before a court-martial for looting.
70 Nigerian soldiers are now facing death at the firing squad. Mr. Commander is appealing against their sentence. But the army's troubles don't end here. It's also dismissed soldiers and disobeying orders. Here's one of those soldiers.
I feel cheated. I feel insulted. I feel embarrassed. I feel humiliated. It's just like 2 people that are fighting now, sir. You want to fight with me? Maybe we both have gun in our hands. But you are wearing bulletproof. Me, I'm carrying an umbrella. So how do you see it? Somebody with a bulletproof and somebody with umbrella. Who is more effective?
Meanwhile, outside military bases, army wives have been protesting. For 5 years, our husbands have been fighting Boko Haram, this woman says, with no visible results. We are tired.
The morale of the troops is extremely low.
Here's Femi Falana again.
The soldiers that have been killed while fighting, they are buried in shallow, unmarked graves. And that is not encouraging. And if you are going to encourage soldiers to fight, you must treat them like human beings.
But even if morale is low and soldiers don't have adequate weapons, does that justify mutiny and soldiers shooting at their commanders in a time of war?
I believe there should be discipline, even in the armed forces. But you have to look at the circumstances of every given case. If you are sentencing people on account of the negligence in not making weapons available, and your soldiers are unable to fight, you don't punish the soldiers. You turn to the authorities to provide the enablement. If the soldiers have the weapons, they now refuse to fight. Of course, that is a very serious thing.
So, is the army failing? With mutinies, orders being disobeyed, and the growing strength of Boko Haram, it sounds like an open and shut case. So what do those responsible for Nigeria's security say? Who's our second expert witness?
Part 2. Take a wider view.
I don't see.
This is Sambo Dasuki, Nigeria's national security advisor. He came to the BBC studio, flanked by an entourage, befitting a man who's both a prince and a former colonel in the army, now advising the president on how to defeat the insurgency.
under the charge of 7th Division. They bear the brunt of most of what is unleashed by Boko Haram.
What are the sort of challenges facing someone who is in the 7th Division?
You are literally on alert to go out of the British government, and you can only do control of
Very stressful.
It's stressful, yes. If you look at other incidents around the world, and how long they some of them are still waiting 50 years later. You won't say this. It's a new phenomenon they're faced with, and they're adopting not as fast as we would want, but they're adopting the new challenges.
He has a point. Even for the strongest army in the world, defending such a huge swathe of territory against a nimble, radical insurgent group would pose major challenges. But shouldn't an army in the country with the largest economy in Africa be able to do more to contain the group?
We've had issues. We've had issues of 1 personnel and 2 of equipment, 3 of cooperation or involvement of neighboring countries. Have all these come in place now, and better late than never.
When you say personnel problems, what do you mean?
Personnel being the military men we had. The quality of some of the soldiers was not what you would want to do in this sort of operation.
Is that because of lack of training?
You could say that lack of training, and also a lack of commitment on the part of some of those who joined the army simply because they were looking for a job, not because they were interested in it. So they need to be careful. A lot of us who serve in the military are not very some of the things that we see.
Such as?
Well, you don't expect the Nigerian soldier to run. He's never been known to run anywhere.
He's referring to widespread reports of Nigerian soldiers tearing off their uniforms, running away from Boko Haram fighters. And then there are those mutinies.
For soldiers to mutiny is a very serious thing. The military depends solely for survival, mutiny, and education, that is very unfortunate. You go through the appeal process, at the end of the day, the president decides whether
So there could be executions?
There could be executions, yes. You know what the punishment is. It's like getting involved in the military coup. If it fails, you know you're going to be tied to a stick. And there is no point in attempting a coup, failing, and then pleading, please let me off. You knew what the punishment was from the beginning. It's the same thing with the military. The punishment is obvious.
But, as we heard from our first expert witness, the human rights lawyer, soldiers say they're outgunned. In one interview, a soldier complained that his platoon only had AK-47s, while Boko Haram had anti-aircraft guns mounted on 4-wheeled drives.
The basic weapon of the soldier is that rifle. And the AK-47 is not just only AK-47. But even that I dispute. Boko Haram did videos of equipment they seized from the Nigerian military.
In the video, the camera pans around a huge arsenal of weapons. Dozens of AK-47s lined up on neat rows. Machine guns, mortar launchers and boxes of ammunition, all captured, the person in the video says, from Nigerian military bases.
Now anybody who sees the amount of equipment they've displayed as having been seized from the Nigerian military will not agree that the soldiers were outgunned or ill-equipped. I think it's an imagination. I chalk it down to somebody who's a coward who's looking for excuses, and that is what it is.
So you're saying the army has all the guns it needs, it doesn't need anything?
No, I don't say that. I'm saying they have sufficient to confront the threat as it is.
Do you think, though, that if you had more advanced weapons, perhaps weapons that you buy from the West, could that help?
Certainly it would help. It is an issue, which was why we made attempts before to procure, and we hit brick walls here and there, but we have to look for alternatives and make do with what we can get.
It's a conflicted answer. He says that soldiers have enough weapons to defeat Boko Haram, so they have no excuse for mutiny. But then he also says they need weapons from the West. So why aren't Nigeria's allies, the US and the UK, stepping in, selling Nigeria with sophisticated arms?
All of a sudden, there was an issue of human rights. But it never sends kids to blow themselves up. I don't know what.
Human rights groups say that some members of the Nigerian military have been slitting throats of detainees and then dumping them in mass graves. The Nigerian authorities say they're investigating. In the meantime, both the British and the US governments have decided not to sell arms to Nigeria. But is this the right decision? Here's our third expert witness.
Part 3. Is the Army failing? A systems check.
My name's Colonel James Hall. I'm a retired officer.
You can still hear the vestiges of the military in his voice, but Colonel James Hall is now enjoying retirement in the Hebrides off the west coast of Scotland, a long way from Nigeria, where he spent the last 3 years of his career advising the military.
There are massive challenges, and if one just gets sank along these reaches, and they just like to be fed up because they aren't dying themselves. Now that is not to say that the military are doing a good job. Anybody reasonably could argue that they are. They've got it back. Boko Haram have made significant strides against them. Over the 4 or 5 years I've been watching it, things have got worse rather than better.
He thinks that the West should be doing more to support the Nigerian military.
The UK needs to think about this really hard, and I personally think that we have been overprotected. We can only get ourselves back into a position where the Nigerians can govern themselves if there is the use of some pretty significant physical violence against Boko Haram in the first place. And at the moment, the Nigerian military are not showing that they can do that.
He says there's one key reason for this.
Their equipment is old, broken, it's frankly not well maintained, and soldiers, men with rifles, are standing on the ground facing Boko Haram with exactly the same weapon systems they have themselves. You have two commanders in isolated posts who are trying to communicate with company headquarters, battalion headquarters by mobile phones. That's not great. So if I had my way, I would pick up trucks, right off, and radios.
But why are there such problems with equipment, given that 20% of Nigeria's budget goes on security services? That's $6 billion a year. Granted, not all of that goes to the military. Some of it goes to the police, but still, it's impossible.
It's a fair question, and the answer to it is not transparent. One can speculate, and of course, everybody will start Nigerians as outsiders. And there is no doubt at all that the systems of procurement over the years have been subject to pretty serious levels of corruption.
So lack of equipment and corruption are two reasons why the army is failing. But he said another problem is the kind of training that goes on in Nigerian army.
Education very seriously. Their tactical training is not as good as they think it is. Their troops need combat training. How do I cope and manage when I'm in a firefight? Those are classic military skills, and let's be quite clear, all the rumours say that they are getting that training increasingly from people like the Russians, and frankly that has to be a good thing. We shouldn't be forcing people to go and fight untrained.
Given the scale of these problems, Colonel Hall says that he's not surprised that some soldiers are refusing to fight.
My experience in the Nigerian Armed Forces, all three services, is that it in fact are an immensely disciplined force. I don't think I've ever come across an African army that has a clearer sense of discipline at all ranks. And actually, in that sense, they would challenge any Western army, I think. Does military discipline break down under pressure? Yes, of course it does. And troops that are under real pressure, frightened, dying, feeling abandoned, their discipline can break.
So, is Nigeria's army failing? We've heard that it's struggling to contain Boko Haram because of inadequate equipment, inappropriate training and low morale. And its human rights record means that Western allies are wary about selling these bombs to Russian governments. But these reasons in themselves don't explain why it's got this bad. After all, the army isn't always like this.
There was a time when it was without training, the best trained, probably one of the best equipped of sub-Saharan African armed forces.
So what went wrong? The irony is, the military itself is partly to blame.
Military governments, as is surprisingly quite common with our history, are often not good at funding their own militaries. So the modern military is very conscious of the fact that actually they didn't do terribly well. They left quite a few years.
Between Nigerian independence and the last military government in 1999, there were only 10 years of civilian government, but 30 of military rule, punctuated by regular coups. Femi Falana, the human rights lawyer, says that it was the fear of being toppled that military leaders kept the army weak.
Over the years, the armed forces were neglected by successive governments for fear of possible coup d'etats. The government have not been buying the necessary weapons for the armed forces.
And the memory of those coups remains vivid for those in power now. Sambo Dasuki, the National Security Advisor we heard from earlier, took part in the coup that removed former military leader Muhammad Buhari in 1985. But even he admits that military rule has damaged the army.
Over time, military being in government doesn't help much. It does affect issues of discipline, and that is probably one of the things that led to this level of the main fear of state of the military and the greatest threat if they don't have equipment to move, they want to makes it very
He was really interested in military, and not about soldiers. All eyes are now on Nigeria's forthcoming elections. The incumbent, Goodluck Jonathan, is fighting a close race against former military leader Muhammad Buhari. Yes, that same leader who was toppled by a military coup. The future of the army may then depend on the following calculation. The next president deciding that the benefits of an army that can defeat an insurgency outweigh the risks of that army one day overthrowing him.
The Inquiry is produced in London by Simon Mabin and me, Neil Rizal. Next week, we're looking at the battle to save the euro, ahead of a key meeting between EU leaders. We want to know what you want to know, so demand an inquiry. Get in touch via the World Service Facebook page or via Twitter at BBC The Inquiry.
Documentaries on the BBC World Service. What can sound tell us about the world we live in? Images of slums might be familiar, but sound gives us a whole different perspective. I'm Dr. Tom Rice, a sound anthropologist, and for the BBC World Service, I'll be taking a sonic journey into the Govinpuri slums in the heart of Delhi.
Biggest sound is pani aa gaya hai. People announce water comes, rush and just fill your buckets and tubs.
In Govinpuri sound, I'll be looking at how voices, music, noise and acoustic atmosphere reveal what life in the slums is really like, and how they both unite and divide the community.
Govinpuri Sound, online at bbcworldservice.com/documentaries.
I'm Zaria Masani, and for the Richer World season, I'll be telling the story of the Tata Group, India's biggest business. It's a major global player from Korea and China to the USA, but cannot maintain its reputation for ethical capitalism in an increasingly competitive world. That's the documentary, Tata, India's global giant, coming up after the news here on the BBC World Service.
BBC News with Jonathan Izard. Jordan has vowed to avenge the death of its Air Force pilot killed by Islamic State militants with an earth-shaking response. The government spokesman made the warning hours after the jihadist group issued a video purporting to show Muammar Qasasbeh being burnt alive. Hundreds of people have gathered in the streets of the capital Amman to demand revenge. An unnamed official is quoted as saying that a failed suicide bomber being held in Jordan will be executed within hours. In a televised address from Washington, King Abdullah of Jordan has called the pilot a hero who died defending his beliefs and his homeland. Within the past few minutes, he's been holding talks with President Obama. Mr. Obama said that if the video of the murder were authentic, it would strengthen the resolve of the US-led coalition to defeat the militants. An Argentine investigator has confirmed that the special prosecutor found dead in his apartment last month, Alberto Nisman, had written a draft arrest warrant for the president. The document was retrieved from a rubbish bin in Mr. Nisman's apartment complex. He was found shot dead the day before he was due to testify in Congress against President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner. Parliament in Britain has voted overwhelmingly in favour of a controversial scientific technique allowing the creation of babies using DNA from 3 people. If the measure is approved by the House of Lords, Britain will become the first country to legalise the procedure. It will stop children from committing some life-threatening diseases. The ratings agency nearly $1.4 billion in US lotteries to establish legal measures known as ratings and mortgage investments. The US Justice Department says Standard & Poor's will allow to pursue the profits to bias its ratings. And Harper Lee, the author of one of the best-selling books of all time, To Kill a Mockingbird, is to publish a second novel more than half a century after the first. It was previously released for BBC News.
I'm Zaria Masani with the documentary for the Richer World season here on the BBC World Service. I'll be telling the story of India's biggest business, the Tata Group.
We are Tata. We deliver you the world.
Tata has now become Britain's biggest manufacturing employer and has dozens of other companies across the globe, from China and Korea to the USA. Tata prides itself on being the world's most ethical business with a unique charity-based ownership model. In this program, I'll be finding out what makes Tata different from other multinationals. My journey begins at the new Jaguar engine plant near Wolverhampton in the UK, which the Queen opened last November. Its operations director is Trevor Lewis.
Well, this is the first engine manufacturing centre that Jaguar Land Rover has for a generation. So we're launching our first diesel engine, going from our Jaguar
Prime Minister David Cameron came here a few months ago and he was very impressed and he said that is the high-tech, nuclear manufacturing Britain needs. Do you think it meets all those criteria?
It does. People can't fail to be impressed. This is over £500 million worth of investment in the West Midlands here in Wolverhampton, with a total job of 1,400 when it's up and running fully, which equates to over 3,500 in the supply chain.
Will the British footprint of this Indian giant continue to grow? The Tata Empire dates back to the 19th century to a family business in India's tiny Parsi Zoroastrian minority. We need to understand where Tata comes from to know what's special about them and how different they are from other multinationals. I'm near Bombay House in Mumbai, the nerve centre of the global Tata Empire. Bombay House has some poignant childhood memories for me. My father worked here for a decade as chief of staff to the legendary J.R.D. Tata, who chaired the Tata Group for more than half a century.
My school was just a few minutes away, and I often came here after school and played in my father's office, and often in JRD's next door. The Tata name is everywhere here. Indians are born in Tata hospitals, their houses are held up with Tata steel, and their electricity comes courtesy of the Tata Power Company. But have Tata become too big for their own good and ours?
For any middle-class Indian parents, if their son or daughter got a job in the Tatas, that would be prestigious.
Jerry Rao is a Mumbai-based business analyst.
They are in the eye of the beholder, patriotic, honorable, committed to philanthropic causes. But in terms of the way they run their businesses, it's pretty much like anyone else.
So where does this prestige come from?
Because they are not a large family, they tend to treat their professional managers well, as colleagues, as interested parties, rather than purely family retainers or something which other business partners do. So that makes them an attractive place from the perspective of a professional manager. I think they are genuinely committed to some kind of and the fact that everybody knows that most of us are like not that individuals or that. And the Tatas who are around tend to lead relatively simple lives.
I'm on a train to Jamshedpur, the model industrial town which Tata Steel carved out of the jungle more than a century ago in one of India's most backward tribal areas. We're traveling through areas rich in coal and iron ore, which make this the heart of Tata Steel's now enormous global empire. I'm talking to a passenger sitting opposite me. What do you think of the way Tatas are running Jamshedpur?
I live in Jamshedpur for 1.5 years almost, and each and every day I am walking, walking track. You will not find a single leaves in the streets. They are so well maintained by the Tata and